dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio. I remain Mark Angelides, and we continue our conversation with Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza. Now, Scott, earlier in the show, we were talking about the recent NBC exclusive regarding
I love that. By the way, I'm going to stop you right there, Mark. We were talking about the letter that these judges signed that criticized the Supreme Court, and I have to stop you because you described it as an exclusive. And what's the most important, or not important, the most interesting aspect of that story to me is, how did this come about? How did these judges happen to write this whole thing and have it published at the NBC portal? And you're the managing editor of LibertyNation.com, Mark. Were you offered the exclusive right to publish this criticism of the Supreme Court by these judges?
So my best guess here, Scott, would be that these civic-minded judges across the country just coincidentally got it into their head at the same time to send off a letter to NBC, and it all just happened to jibe together. And then some plucky young reporter in the pool room said, "Hey, you know what? I've got these 12 letters. Let's put it together into an article. What do you think?"
We know that that's zero, and the coordinated campaign of it tells us all we need to know about it. If it was one judge writing one letter, I would feel a lot differently or think a lot differently about it than I do now. The fact that part about it wasn't even discussed in the article,
sure,
it tells you, I think, everything we need to know about it. This is just it's a coordinated campaign to move the needle, not based on legal writings and scholarly work, but instead politics and opinion. And of course, I think those judges, while they'll lose, the respect of those of us who thinks they should keep their trap shut when it comes to politics, is because they're judges. I'm sure that their dinner party circuit is going to be more filled than ever because of their open and notorious hatred for, the anti-progressive, anti-woke agenda.
Absolutely right. So there's really, let's just clarify some things here. There's really nothing that the judges involved in this can do, right, other than get themselves nominated to the expanded Supreme Court when a Democrat eventually comes into power.
When you sent me some ideas for our discussion, and you said the way you phrased it specifically was like, what can they do to I wish I had it in front of me, because I thought redress. That's what you said for redress, and I thought, this is a perfectly termed question, because we all have the same right to redress when the Supreme Court does something we don't like. We can try to get a constitutional amendment enacted. If they say the Constitution establishes a certain thing, we can get below that, just federal law changed. Also, we can, just like so many Democrats on the Judiciary Committee tried to do, get more justices added to the court, change the composition of the court, change their jurisdiction, vote a different party into office who's going to, change things. But they cannot do anything from their perch on the bench, because without question, they are lower status. They are nothing. You know what they are? They are literally the people who do the job that is beneath the Supreme Court. And I mean that in terms of their judging. They do the bric-a-brac. They do the everyday, the humdrum. You want fries with that? That's what you get at the district court level. It's the more advanced. And for all the foodies in the audience, Mark and I both are. And, that is the Michelin 3-star, right? Versus the fast food joint at the district court level.
And that is a good, solid answer. So one of the criticisms that they had, and I can actually see why this would resonate with a certain segment of the audience for which it was intended, was that the justices aren't explaining their decisions in a way that these lower court judges would like. Now, for me, I could, I've got about 15 reasons why, and it doesn't take being a district judge to figure that out. But Scott, your take.
So these judges are brilliant people, by the way. Just because I don't like the way they do their jobs and the things that they write doesn't mean that they're not wicked smart and very accomplished. And you'd be wrong to think that anything they did wasn't, by design or well considered. So, I think that one of the things that's interesting about it is you said that for their audience, and we don't even know who their audience is. Like their audience may be a dean at a law school they're trying to impress to get a professorship, or their wife's whatever, so that they don't get, so that they get hero points for attacking, the Trump. And that's the thing that I just think is kind of funny about it. And also, of course, as an investigative piece, I'd like to see who the ringleader was. Somebody passed this around. This was a thing that, back to the origin story of it all.
So, they're saying that the Supreme Court justices, they're playing their cards too close to their chest when they're giving out, when they're making rulings. And reading between the lines.
Well, Mark, I thought I answered your question, but maybe I didn't.
They specifically mean in cases that tend to favor Donald Trump is what they're talking about.
Yeah, but that's not true. My point was that these district court judges, and they know what the Supreme Court guidance on this is, and they're not following that guidance because of any number of reasons. I would be, it would be a bit speculation, but I mean, do I suspect Trump derangement syndrome? Yes, I do suspect Trump derangement syndrome. Or just such a willfulness. One of the things we saw during the end days of the Biden administration was, I think by a fair reading, some fairly radical leftist and progressive judges who, it's a real tragedy that we don't have minority participation in our judge picking. Meaning if the Republicans control the presidency and the Senate, they just push through whoever they want. And the same thing is true with the Democrats and the old system where the minority had to at least be, discuss the choices, and they had some veto so that the worst of both sides didn't get in, was, I think, way better for the country. But now I think that maybe it's just, if you looked at, and I've done this, I've written about it for the site, the radicals that they were able to just push through. And who knows, of course, bringing up another topic, did Joe Biden really know about these people? Or who's the person who actually picked these judges and sent their names to the Senate, for consideration? So I just think, Mark, that they know what they're doing. And I don't know why the Supreme Court hasn't taken the gloves off even more. And I suspect it is one reason only, which is John Roberts' wish to try to go along to get along. He is very much doesn't like to move fast or take big strides in any regard, I think.
Which is probably a good thing for a Chief Justice. One more question on this topic, Scott. It seems to me the recent writings in dissent, usually by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, are almost encouraging the lower courts to, it's like almost like an invitation to call SCOTUS legitimacy into question, because she's lambasting her fellow justices in the rulings. Your take?
Mark, I share the opinion that Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's rulings do seem to do that. And I think that, she's a baby justice. She hasn't been on the court that long. And she's not that, she doesn't have that conservative kind of institutionalist, mindset. And I think it's not cool. And she shouldn't do it. But, I wouldn't call it a hanging offense. I just wish she would stop, because it invites this kind of thing, which conservatives and libertarians may actually get a benefit from it, because what could happen is the pushback from the court could actually shut down a significant amount of the play that they have, they being the left who are district court justices. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like, okay, you can talk quietly amongst yourself as long as you can handle yourself if you're the classroom. And if your classrooms were like mine as a kid, inevitably the whispers would grow to a roar, and then the teacher would come in and say, okay, now there's no talking at all. You basically ruined it, like your discretionary powers. And I could see that happening with the courts in some significant way, where the Supreme Court, because if everybody doesn't know, the Supreme Court is the boss of the district courts in a certain way. They don't choose those judges. That's done by the executive, confirmed by the Senate. But in terms of how they rule and make their rulings and the rules that they follow, that's all done basically it's John Roberts and his colleagues on the court that determine all that. So
don't, and I was going to use some unsuitable language. Don't annoy the Chief Justice if you're banking on his support for anything at all. We'll be back with Scott after this short break.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.